Hello and welcome to the Vault of Truth YouTube channel. This is Flat Earth Proof number 59, the Eötvös effect. This is a replacement for the previous Proof 59 that dealt with the moon terminator illusion. Not long ago I discovered that I was incorrect about the moon crescent not facing the sun with a perfectly perpendicular line to the moon terminator shadow line. So that proof is getting thrown out. At some point I do plan to make a video explaining what is happening with the moon terminator illusion, because the little bit of material you find about it on the internet is very poorly explained, which contributed to my misunderstanding as well. Now let's move forward and address the Eötvös effect. The globe proponents really think they have the flat earthers on this one. So as you can see here in this diagram, when a plane or any object moves west against the Earth's rotation around the globe, the result is that you get a slower angular speed moving around the central point of the Earth. So naturally this would cause there to be less of a centrifugal force pulling you up away from the Earth, causing you to weigh slightly more. Now looking at the opposite case, if you are flying in a plane or any other object and traveling around the curvature of the Earth, moving with the spin of the Earth in an eastward direction, you would be traveling at a faster angular speed around the central point of the Earth, resulting in a larger upward centrifugal force, causing you to weigh slightly less. As you can see here, this is an experiment that was conducted flying east and west over Australia. And you can see that when flying west, the object weighed roughly 5 grams more than when flying east. So we are talking about roughly a 1% change in weight in traveling west versus traveling east. So how in the world would this work on the flat Earth model? Well, if you've been watching a lot of my videos, at this point you should understand that most flat earthers agree that there's an ether vortex field over the Earth that rotates in a westward direction at roughly 15 degrees per hour. And we have a lot of different proofs that this ether field exists. And I've discussed these before, but I'll do a quick recap. Obviously, ring laser gyros pick up the 15 degree per hour rotation. And this rotation appears to change with altitude as well, which immediately disproves the globe, because that should never change if it were due to Earth's spin. There are also small variations in this rotational force that are detected. Mainstream science's excuse for this is that ocean currents, melting polar caps, or shifting tectonic phenomenon cause tiny variations in the spin of the Earth. But of course, what they are really detecting is changing ether wind. That varies by the time of day and season in the year. The next evidence we have for the ether field is the behavior of Foucault pendulums, which mainstream science attributes to the spin of the Earth. But as we've discussed on my channel, it is either the rotating ether field or rotational Machian forces that are causing this. And the same holds true for our next piece of evidence that the field exists, which is the 15 degree per hour rotation of physical gyroscopes. But as far as the physical gyroscopes are concerned, it has to be one that is sensitive enough to detect this small amount of rotational force. Typically commercial grade gyros that are contained in some kind of vacuum chamber with ultra low friction bearings. Then of course the next proof that we have the field exists is the Elias effect, which is the weird behavior of gravimeters and pendulums during solar eclipses. This weird behavior has also been observed during some lunar eclipses as well. As you can see here in this experiment, this diagram shows the behavior of an automatic pendulum and a manual pendulum over the course of an eclipse. So you can see from the start of the eclipse to the maximum, there's not really a lot of divergence. But once you hit that maximum point and move beyond, you can see that the pendulums start behaving very wildly. So it's apparent that the sun and moon, especially when in conjunction, have an impact on the ether field, which imparts some real measurable forces down on Earth. The next piece of evidence that we have is stellar aberration, which mainstream science attributes to the Earth moving from one side of its orbit to the other, causing a parallax shift in the stars. But again, those of you that have been watching my channel know that stellar aberration can be caused by changing ether wind. Yet another piece of evidence that we have for the ether field is the Hutchison effect, This is when you have multiple high voltage, high EMF devices all running at the same time, causing objects to levitate, the fusion of dissimilar materials, and the cold melting of metals. So these kind of experiments demonstrate that electricity, magnetism, gravity, and even the state of matter itself are all modalities of the ether field. And it's clear that when you do something to greatly alter the state of or tug at one of these modalities, you can affect other modalities. So looking at something like levitation that is caused from producing high levels of EMF, it's clear that you can manipulate the gravity modality by hitting a certain node in 3D space with multiple high-intensity EMF frequencies. So again, all this proves the existence of an ether and disproves gravity being the result of the bending and warping of space-time. And finally, we have the research conducted by Vladimir Otsukovsky in the cutting-edge field of etherodynamics, where he not only identifies the properties of the ether field, but also identifies ether particles themselves, known as amers. He is even able to identify the properties of an amer, such as their mass, diameter, etc. So just for a quick recap, we have the three modalities of the ether. You have the dielectric, which is responsible for storage and separation of electrical charge, mediating cell structures and spatial tension. You have the magnetic modality, which is responsible for spatial orientation, vortex motion, and the contraction or compression of cosmic and physical bodies. And then finally, we have the radiant modality, which is the transmission or wave-like modality that transmits energy currents, information, and light. These three modalities are intertwined. There is also an ether gravity model. As you can see here, large bodies essentially feed on the ether field, creating a constant inflow to maintain pressure. So basically, gravity is caused by the annihilation of ether by matter, creating a sink or low pressure zone. So the flow of ether from high pressure to low pressure basically creates a fluid-like push that pushes objects in the direction of flow, instead of the mainstream theory of gravity, which is mass attracting and pulling mass. Or to be more technically correct, mass creating a three-dimensional sinkhole in the fabric of space-time, causing other nearby objects of mass to fall into the space-time curvature towards that given object. One last thing to point out about the ether gravity model is that the ether is denser the further you get from a mass, and less dense the closer you get to a mass. So this creates the pressure difference, which causes gravity. So you can think of it as an object being pushed upon by a flowing water current. This is why the ether field is commonly referred to as a fluid-like field. Now keep all of that in mind as we look at a fluid vortex. If you move against the direction of the spin, it creates a local pressure drop relative to the surrounding area. This in turn causes an upward buoyant force that can lift objects, and this is often demonstrated experimentally with spinning water and submerged objects. So according to principles of fluid dynamics and the Magnus effect, the unequal pressure causes objects to be pushed upward when they are moving against the spin of a vortex. So now, with all of that in mind, when we look at this animation of the spinning ether vortex over the Earth, moving from east to west, we can clearly see what is happening. If you were to get in a plane and fly to the east, you would be flying against the spin of the vortex, resulting in a slightly upward pushing force against the overall downward pushing force of ether gravity. This slight upward force would cause objects to weigh slightly less traveling to the east, and to weigh slightly more traveling west. And so there you have it, the Eötvös effect explained on the flat Earth model. One last thing I'd like to point out as well is that traveling either north or south would be neutral in relation to each other in regards to the weight of objects, because you would be traveling perpendicular to the flow of the ether vortex in both cases. So now the big question, and that is, if the Eötvös effect can be explained in both the globe Earth model and the flat Earth model, then how is this a flat Earth proof? Or a debunking of the globe? Well, let's take a look. If you've been watching my videos for a long time now, you are probably familiar with this graphic, That represents the rotation of the Earth around the Earth-Moon barycenter. Globe defenders always forget this major motion of the Earth. And I'm pretty sure that's done on purpose because it gives them nothing but problems in so many different areas. Even here with the Eötvös effect. As we have seen, the change in weight between traveling east and west is roughly 1%. They claim that's due to the 1,000-mile-per-hour spin of the Earth at the equator. What they are forgetting, however, is that there would be an additional effect or difference in weight felt between the far side of the Earth and the near side of the Earth to the Earth-Moon barycenter. The Earth's rotation around the barycenter at the equator moves at about 66 miles per hour, in the same direction as the spin of the Earth, supposedly. So on the far side of the Earth from the barycenter, you'd be moving at 1,066 miles per hour, and on the near side to the barycenter, you'd just be moving at the 1,000 miles per hour at the equator. So this would give you an Eötvös change of roughly 0.07%, flying from one side of the Earth to the other, regardless of whether you're traveling east or west. Is this change ever detected? No, it's not. And I can already hear the globe proponents saying, oh, but on the far side of the Earth, you have both the Earth and the Moon lined up with each other, which would increase the gravitational pull, offsetting the centrifugal force from the additional sling of the Earth around the barycenter. And I can also hear them saying, oh, and then when you travel around to the inside of the Earth-Moon barycenter, in between the Earth and the Moon, that you would then have the Moon's gravity giving you a slight upward pull, offsetting the lack of centrifugal swing happening there. The problem with both of those statements is that even on the Moon side of the Earth, its gravity would only affect your weight by 0.0003%. So the Moon's gravity in no way, in either case, compensates for the Eötvös change of 0.07%. The final argument I can hear globe proponents saying is that, oh, well, the force is too small to be measured. And the reason why that statement is wrong is that even standard high-powered gravimeters are able to detect changes in weight or gravitational pull or push, depending on which model you're talking about, as small as 0.000001%. So even average high-power gravimeters would have no problem picking up the Eötvös effect emerging from the sling of the Earth around the Earth-Moon barycenter. So there you have it. This is another wonderful flat Earth proof.